So, welcome to our session, Trustworthy AI Needs Trustworthy Data, tackling the linguistic discrimination in training data, organized by the Bulgarian Center for Not-for-Profit Law. And my name is Zakhari Yankov, senior legal consultant in the center. And I'll be moderating today's session. There is also a translation channel, although it says German, it's actually in Bulgarian, so English Bulgarian. Unfortunately, the drop-down menu of Zoom didn't allow me to speak Bulgarian, which I think is pretty fitting for our session topic today. So feel free to use that if you need. And I just make one more clarification. Although we have a translator, also pretty fitting in the topic, I chose to speak in English because it's just, I feel more comfortable speaking on this topic with this terminology in English language rather than my own native language, which by itself is an issue, I think. So before we jump into the discussion with our panel, just a brief introduction of the topic. So AI and NLP, meaning natural language processing technologies, are becoming an ever-growing part of our daily lives. Some AI-based services, such as automated translation, have been around for so long that we take them for granted at this point. And most of us, we don't even spare a moment to think how they actually work. Meanwhile, the recently launched ChatGPT became the service with the fastest growing user base in history, raising a lot of concerns about where the AI is going, a lot of concerns about certain sectors of the economy, concerns about jobs as well. Meanwhile, AI is also becoming more evident in the public sector as well. Just recently, the Romanian Prime Minister announced that he's having a new member of his office, an AI assisted advisor, to help him track what people think on Facebook, for example, and other platforms. AI, however, has been already implemented in the decision-making processes in different countries for a number of years. For example, artificial intelligence was already used to decide what unemployment, who and what amount of unemployment benefits are owed to people, or whether or not somebody would get accommodation, or where burglary is more likely to happen. Today, AI is more present in our lives than we realize, and it keeps growing. The possibility seems endless, but the real question is, how can we fully uphold human rights standards when developing and using AI? In today's session, we will discuss one very particular aspect of AI and NLP-based services, the linguistic discrimination, we call it. The market-driven development of services naturally inclined towards the use of English-based technologies, using English-based training data. Some other widely used languages also enjoy rich and diverse data sets to train AI. However, the use of AI services for underrepresented languages, such as Bulgarian or Slovenian, raises concerns. Would those services provide comparable quality to English-speaking users and non-English speaking users? Could some safeguards of the AI services set on the basis of English be bypassed when using underrepresented languages? The issue of inherent biases for the AI algorithms is already well known, but are we facing another aspect of this problem? exporting biases inherent in the English-based training data to non-English speaking communities using the same AI tools. The purpose of this short session, this is just 1 hour, is to contribute to the much needed and wider dialogue between human rights defenders and tech developers. That's why today's panel, we have representatives of both groups. On the side of human rights defenders, we have Ms. Katina Boncheva and Mr. Mikhail Ekimjiev, prominent Bulgarian human rights lawyers who have represented clients before the European Court of Justice and the European Human Rights Courts in many cases and won many of them. We also have Mr. Domen Savic, who leads an NGO based in Slovenia called Citizen B, which investigates the changing landscape of human rights in an information society, investigating the surveillance society, mapping out propaganda media practices, and encouraging active citizen participation. On the tech side, we have Mr. Peter Tornev, who is the director of a big tech company, the Technology Center of Accenture Bulgaria, with more of 15 years of experience in the tech sector. And we also have Mr. Martin Buyanov, who is an expert on machine learning, also working for a number of years in the tech center, the tech industry. Excuse me. So, I would like to start with the most rudimental question, and then we just have turns for our panelists to voice their opinions. So do we understand how AI services, tools, and products work? And to clarify the question, new emerging technologies usually are not widely understood and thus discouraging most people to question them or to independently test them. Do we have this problem with AI? And if so, how we should overcome it? Is it a transparency issue or something else? So I'll give the floor first to Martin from our tech experts. Martin?
Thank you for the nice introduction, Zachary. That was great. I'm glad to be part of this session. Right. So, from my point of view, interpretability, bias, and fairness, these are all active areas of research in the machine learning world. So we don't really have the answers yet, but we're seeing a big increase in activity in researching these areas. And I think that this increase has been fueled by the fact that AI is entering more and more areas of our lives. And it's important to address these issues before it's too late. And as with most software development, it's much easier to fix a bug before it has been released. But even in your introduction, you gave a few examples of AI being deployed into the world, and it's sometimes it's doing real harm. It's unfair. And so we should be careful when we deploy these solutions. And in this case, there's a big issue with the finality of the deployment. So at some point, entities, they decide that the algorithm will always be 100% correct. And that's just not the case. And in these cases, I think it's important. So even after we deploy it, we should have some kind of procedure with a human in the loop who is, on the one hand, he can overrule the system in case it makes an error, and it's obvious that a human procedure wouldn't do this from an ethical standpoint, like firing a teacher or stopping disabilities for someone. And on the other hand, this person or entity should be held accountable for the deeds of the machine.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I'll switch now to one of our human rights experts, Domen. Same question, and just to focus on the transparency issue. Should we push for more transparency, or maybe we're going to follow in the trap with, having terms and conditions of 20 pages which nobody reads, so it would going to be in vain? Please.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure. So I would start us off with saying that I can't believe we are still protesting this thing because issue of transparency comes up in every new technology development cycle. So you're talking about big data collections, you're talking about AI, you're talking about other topics in the field of digital technologies. Every time we have this debate about transparency with technologies and servicing being non-transparent and really opaque towards the end users. So obviously, as a digital rights or as a human rights activist, I would say that we need more transparency, but I would go a step further and say that, we need to develop a culture where asking for more transparency isn't an issue to begin with. So if we have some standards in terms of technological development, if we have some standards about services, we should, urgently develop some standards in the field of transparent access and transferability of technologies as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously, I've already played with ChatGPT quite a lot, but I have no clue what is the amount of training data, for example, based on Bulgaria, used by it. So for me personally, I really don't feel empowered to question it very correctly. We're going to see an example of how ChatGPT works with Bulgarian later on. So I'm turning to Peter Turner now and his view.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you very much again also for the invitations. I think it's an important topic, but I would like to take a little bit a more helicopter view and to touch point to kind of build on what Martin and Domen has already mentioned. First of all, we need to think about AI and to touch and to figure it, to put it in a way like we call it responsible AI in practice. So this is where all organizations need to expand the ethical AI requirements, and there's some fundamental criteria that they need to include, some of which you have touched upon, which are transparency, but that's not the only one. We need to talk about fairness, accountability, soundness, robustness, and sustainability. These all can form the part of the responsible and ethical AI, okay? So that means that what if we don't build the AI with the right algorithmic consideration, as an example, yeah? That Martin, I think he touched upon on this one. That means that this could be, data can be exploited against us. However, the constant fear of AI coming into the picture nowadays is I think it's becoming a little bit unfair as well, because human beings in general are trying to make their life easier, right? And we cannot stop that. I mean, we cannot stop the progression of how we are evolving as human beings as well, because people are trying to modernize the ways of working since ancient times, right? If they needed a shovel in order to plow the fields, they created a shovel. That's kind of very basic form of AI, because they created instruments to make it easier for them. But the bigger question here is how we can touch upon on the ethics. Yeah, and that's the main question here. So that's why I mentioned all those criteria that we have discussed already. Because for me, being transparent means to provide explainability, understandability, and traceability of the information that we're using. Just to give an example. Accountability means that we need to manage the oversight and address the auditability of the data sets that we're using. So that means every information that we're using somehow needs to be ethically used. And that's why all those standards are coming to the picture, right? Because one of very interestingly, for a report that we have recently launched, and you can go to our website at Accenture and find it there. Organization found out that despite of the real value that they see in artificial intelligence, many still struggle to address the risk that we associate with it. Okay, so 58% identify AI as the biggest potential cause of unintended consequences. And only 11% of those people that have been researched say that they have full capable of assessing the risks that are associated with AI adoption. And that means what happens? Companies need to start educating their people. That's the part that we talk about when we talk about accountability and robustness and sustainability, all those points that I've mentioned. But everything belongs to the companies to first educate the users of the usage of AI, how they're going to benefit us, so also we don't fear the AI. In reality, think of it, you use it at the moment in your daily life. You're already using AI on quite a bunch of, on your phone, you have a lot of AI already, right? Whether maybe, Zahari, when you're saying whether it's using the right information for depending on the languages, maybe still we're not still there yet, because the main language that people use for everything is English at that point in time. But this will come because there are more more data sets that will be used potentially. That's why I think ChatGPT also have opened up to the public, because they need the data to be this AI to be trained. They cannot train it by themselves anymore, right? That's why you have all those users registered. That's users are playing around with it, making fun comments. They're asking funny questions and they're using their own languages, right? So that means that the AI algorithm has already been kind of trained on this. So little by little, I think we'll get there. But of course, the marginal languages that we all use, let's say in Eastern Europe, for example, that are not widely used across the globe, probably they'll come later, 100%. And that's inevitable. It will happen. But the question for me is to go back to what I had mentioned earlier on, is about the ethics that we need to train the AI. That's the most important thing. Where are the boundaries of how we're using the AI in order to serve us and not to do harm to us, to protect our data, to protect our life, because everything now we have on our phone, right? So imagine if that gets disappeared somehow, how you protect it. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. We are going to elaborate a little bit later. I'm going to show you some examples, both from ChatGPT and some automated translation tools. Before moving to them, though, I'm going to give the floor to Ms. Boncheva and Mr. Kim GF. I remind you, we have a translation. So if somebody chooses to speak Bulgarian, you need to switch the translation to, although it says German, it is Bulgarian English. So I'm going to a little bit specify the question for you. So we heard about companies educating, we heard about standards. Is it time for the state to step in and to regulate the sector?
Hello, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and I will be using the option for translation, so I'll be speaking mainly Bulgarian. Да, определено е време за намеса. Да, определено изкуственият интелект помага страшно много на всички ни и вече е много трудно да си представим хипотеза, в която живеем живота си и правим нещата, които сме свикнали да правим доста по-бързо, без изкуствен интелект, но това не може да мине без регулации. И първо на въпроса дали разбираме как работи изкуственият интелект. Макар принципно да разбираме, макар да имаме обща идея как работи изкуственият интелект, ние не можем да знаем конкретно как работи дадено приложение. И оттам, ако взема повод от предишното изказване, въпросът за етиката, въпросът за стандартите на етиката, как той да бъде заложен и как, ако щете, да бъде вкаран в регулацията от страна на държавата, от страна на съюзите, това са правата на човека. Това са критериите, които са заложени в стандартите за правата на човека. Те отразяват ценностите на съвременното общество, ценностите, които са заложени в международните документи. И защо всъщност на първо място стои прозрачността, както го поставихте вие въпроса? В ситуация, в която имаме непрозрачност, в ситуация, в която алгоритъмът ни е непрозрачен, когато ние не знаем какви задачи се преследват, когато ние не знаем какви критерии се преследват, това е проблем с прозрачността и това оказва влияние върху разкриването на ситуация на допусната, например, дискриминация. Същото нещо и с непрозрачността на базите данни, въз основа на които се работи. Една база данни, разбира се, в най-лошия възможен случай може да бъде манипулирана, но тя също така може да бъде статистически неточна. Тя може да бъде извадка от цялата информация. Дори тя може да бъде абсолютно статистически точна, но да не отразява последни актуални промени в общественото развитие, които в един момент биха могли да дадат превес в оценката, да променят социалния пейзаж, а това да не е нещо, което изкуственият интелект да може да хване. Всъщност непрозрачността реално пречи да разберем дали резултати, които ние получаваме в отговор на поставен въпрос на изкуствения интелект и които очевидно в конкретен случай облагодетелстват една категория лица, например признак пол или по признак етнос или увреждане или каквото и да е, дали те са резултат от пряка дискриминация, която е заложена било в алгоритъма, било в базата данни умишлено и предварително, или пък са резултат от проява на несъзнавани стереотипи, или пък са резултат от непълнота, неточности в база данни, без да са заложени умишлено, или в крайна сметка дали не става въпрос за един обективен резултат, при който имаме коректен изход, коректно дадено решение от страна на машината, макар на пръв поглед да изглежда, че дадена група е представена по-зле на даден защитен признак. Така че този тип непрозрачност, която не позволява това изследване, всъщност води и до сериозна пречка при доказването на дискриминационно отнасяне в съда, защото и по този начин всъщност тя пряко влияе върху правото на ефикасни правни средства за защита срещу подобен резултат от страна на машина. Още по-съществено при липсата на прозрачност това може да доведе до манипулиране на поведението заради влиянието върху подсъзнанието на човека и не случайно в проекта за регламент на изкуствения интелект, който знаем, че към момента Европейския съюз е започнал и който е на ниво Европейски парламент, има изрична забрана за някои практики в изкуствения интелект и не случайно има заложени изрични задължения за прозрачност, когато става въпрос за различни системи, например системите, когато взаимодействат с хората, системи, които се използват за разпознаване на емоции, системи, които генерират, които манипулират съдържание, като задължението за прозрачност, поне по начина, по който за момент е формулирано в проекта, ако не претърпи изменения, се изразява преди всичко в надлежно уведомяване на хората, преди да взаимодействат с система, с изкуствен интелект, че това се случва, с някои изключения, свързани с разкриване на престъпления. Аз обаче искам да отида малко по-нататък отвъд прозрачността и да спомена и проблема с огледалото. Всъщност става въпрос за стереотипизирането, което е присъщо за човека. Сега говоря за вътрешното, за скритото стереотипизиране, говоря за несъзнаваното, изобщо не говоря за ценности, за вярвания, за убеждения на хората и обществата. Говоря за тези вродени стереотипи, които излизат когато човек направи теста за скрити асоциации и който показва колко бързо правим връзка между двойки идеи. Ако те са ни много познати и много присъщи, ние правим много бързо връзка. Ако не са толкова стереотипизирани, правим тази връзка значително по-бавно. И трябва да знаете, опитайте го този тест, ще останете изненадани от резултатите. В интерес на истината, човек, който надгражда ценностната система, понякога не допуска, че е възможно тези скрити стереотипи да стоят. Това може да го направи. Човек може да филтрира резултата от собственото си изследване и да си даде сметка, че нещо е стереотип, но ценностите са друго. Това нещо трудно може да бъде направено поне за момента от машина. И до толкова и самия изкуствен интелект по този начин агравира стереотипите, възпроизвежда ги. И естествено стои проблема и със сложността. Ще маркирам само това на последно място. При по-сложните системи на изкуствения интелект ние наблюдаваме частично автономно поведение, което е абсолютно непредвидимо, необяснимо. И от тази гледна точка това води до резултати, при които ние не можем да си обясним рационално и да проверим защо е това е така.
Thank you. Благодаря, че спомена стереотипи специално. Thank you for mentioning stereotypes. The example, I'm going to share my screen now and show you some examples. And they are a showcase for exactly this, stereotypes and I would say inherent biases. So. Just a moment. Yeah, I think you see the PowerPoint, right? So there are languages, I think probably the correct term, I hope, is genderless languages, where you don't have pronouns based on genders, and you actually assume the gender of whoever carries action by the context. Turkish is one of them. There was a famous, some years ago, there was a famous example of lists of professions, and then the Google Translate, when translating to English from Turkish, says the gender by assumption. And usually the good stuff, you know, the prestigious professions, they go to the male. So he's a doctor, he's a professor, and then other professions, they go to with the female pronoun. She's a nurse, she's a secretary. So apparently Hungarian is another such language. So Google Translate, they kind of fixed it for English. So now you can see in Hungarian, one is a doctor, and then the translation they propose is she's a doctor, or alternatively, he's a doctor, because it knows. However, the same expression in Hungarian, when you switch the language you're translating to Slovenian, let's say, it immediately assumes that you're speaking about a male, and it doesn't give us an alternative. And I'm going to show the same thing with another kind of popular translation tool, DeepL, which works with far less languages than Google Translate. But basically, you can see the same. Finnish is another genderless language. So once I write, I want to translate to English, you can see here how the translator gives me the options, the alternatives. But if I do it for Bulgarian, it kind of does, but in a very wrong way. And I'm going to explain for the non-Bulgarian speakers. So it gives me the male pronoun here. And then it gives me the alternative with the male pronoun and the female form of the noun. So it's just wrong in a very strange way. So I would ask you to comment about this example. First of all, can you really blame those tools? They're produced by a private company, which seeks profit, of course. And of course, they rely on bigger markets, and therefore they rely on English. Can we blame them? Is it an issue? Is it a discrimination by them? Can you speak about that? Or is it too far-fetched? Do we need a standard maybe for the amount and quality of the training data for such tools in order to approve them for certain language and market them as appropriate for certain language? So let's start with Domen this time.
I think you all know what I'm going to say, and your point is very relevant. So we're talking about private companies developing these tools for specific markets in general, and they don't care basically about smaller markets or markets they're not interested in. At the same time, these markets are not completely irrelevant, or you have entities in these markets using these tools despite the fact that they weren't, let's say, covered or they weren't in the focus of the tool developer as they started off, right? So I don't have a silver bullet answer to this question, but I would say that some form of either regulatory framework or testing phase of these tools on the markets that aren't, let's say, covered by the or they're not interesting by the standards of the developer should be in place or should be used if we want to actually use these tools, right? Because generally speaking, these tools are only useful if you don't have a group of people standing behind them and then checking their work, right? It needs to be automated and it needs to be basically foolproof. And we've seen time after time that this is not the case, and not only with translation engines, but also with other engines that are based on language dictionaries or collection of language dictionaries. We can see that is still an issue. So I would say testing, but furthermore, having some form of certification done by either the government, the ministry, or relevant authorities in order to assure that the tools are working as they are supposed to do.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Boncho, in your previous answer, I think you touched upon this topic quite a bit. Would you add something based on the example I just showed?
Да, истината е, че резултата от тези преводи не ми харесва особено, но мисля, че тук става въпрос по-скоро за неадекватно представяне на резултата от самите програми, от работата им. И информацията, която получаваме, не е представена коректно като дадено цялостно решение, поне според мен. В този смисъл, според мен би трябвало да има съобщения, които да ни дават информация, пределна яснота за това какъв е продукта, който ни се предлага от тази система и доколко са коректни неговите отговори. Тоест едно автоматично генерирано предварително, предупредително и достатъчно видимо съобщение, че е възможно да има грешки въз основа на специфики на езици, въз основа на културологични особености, сложност на езика, е възможно да свърши работа, така че тези резултати да не изглеждат толкова фрустриращи. Между другото, интересно е, че преводача, този първият преводач, който вие ползвате, става доста по-предпазлив, когато замесим адвокати, защото на изречението, което е зададено за превод "тя е адвокат, той е секретар", от български на унгарски, заради факта, че в унгарски език няма ползване на родове, и после обратно от унгарски на български, имаме превод, че адвокатът и секретарят и в двата случая са мъжки род. Между другото, същото и с английски. По-предпазлив го казвам, защото при тестване с примера "тя е доктор, той е медицинска сестра", преводачът е доста упорит и винаги, когато превежда на други езици през унгарски или през фински, които също са безполови, доктора винаги става мъж, медицинската сестра става жена. Но пак казвам, когато намесим адвокати, е по-различно. Има и нещо много, много интересно. Когато съобщението се генерира на английски, да кажем от унгарски на английски, се появява едно много важно съобщение. На български това съобщение не се появява. Не го намерих на немски, на италиански, на френски, но когато е на английски, се появява съобщение. Някои изречения могат да включват алтернативи, изменени по род, и за да ги видите, кликнете върху изречението. Кликването върху изреченията дава тези резултати и в секция, наречена "Научете повече", действително има доста подробно обяснение по какъв метод се генерират преводите, когато става въпрос за информация и превод по специфика по род. Тоест едно такова съобщение, само че доста по-категорично, доста по-видимо в началото. Извинявайте, ние постоянно се апгрейдваме, тази система не е окончателна, работим непрекъснато, давайте ни обратна информация. Това е, според мен, достатъчно, за да заличи неприятното чувство от този проблем.
Peter, I'm curious what you have to say, because in your previous answer, I think basically you answered to some extent, because you said that we just need time. So first we do it for English, and the other languages we kind of catch up. This is at least what I took from your previous answer.
Yes and no. First of all, there are a lot of specificities. I think Kalina kind of explained some of those things, but there are a lot of specificities from language to language, which is pretty difficult to catch, because if you're not deliberately studying, I don't know, Bulgarian or English or German or Hungarian, there are specificities that potentially the AI will not be able to catch immediately unless you train them with an absolute accuracy of the language, right? That's one thing. I've mentioned about the principles of the responsible AI. One of them was fairness, when we talked about that fairness means to remove the discrimination and to support diversity and inclusion. But this, for sure, because these are private companies, you touched upon this, these are private companies that focus on a particular market, right? And particular languages are most widely used. Ergo, at a certain point, I understand why they're doing it like this, because also it takes a lot of effort, money, and tools in order to enable AI in all the forms that we are looking for. Imagine to translate one thing because even when Google Translate started, it didn't start with all the languages. This is back in times, right? It started with English, German, like literally the main languages that are German, English, Spanish, and some other languages, right? But initially started only with those. Now, if you click on Google Translate, you see all the languages listed there. And apparently they keep on training the AI algorithm. Again, however, I'm still focusing that's why the principle of responsible AI need to be deeply inherited in each company, right? All of the people, they need to be trained on all those principles. Because there are also certain steps to ensure that AI is ethical, which will include a responsible AI in it. One of them is the governance, right? They need to identify and articulate the responsible AI mission across the organization. The second thing is to touch upon risk policy and control, which is the second thing. The third thing is the technologies and enablers, right? So we need to develop tools in order to support the ethical AI principles. And the last piece, which is super important, is the culture and the training. That means we need to empower the leadership, to empower the whole business, to empower the employees of this clear understanding of what ethical AI means and what are the success criteria. So those companies will catch up 100%, because they need to start now complying with the regulations that will be imposed either by the European Union or the US or all the other countries. And I think Kalina touched really well upon all those things as well from a lawyer point of view. And of course, this is why the lawyers are clashing with the business, because lawyers need to stick to the point of what the law says, but the business also need to ensure that they're catching up with the market and able to satisfy the users. Because in order for business to be successful, they need to satisfy the users of that business, whether it's a product or whether it's a service. This is the first and the fundamental goal of every business. Otherwise, the business will not exist, right? And then they need to follow those standards and that we talked about. But again, to be honest, let me put something like from a personal point of view also here, like I'm not that bothered when I see that error, but that's me. but there are people definitely can be insulted, right? Because they say like,
we'll touch upon this in the next example.
All
so
right.
keep your thoughts. You don't have that much time left, so I would just really like to show it. So Marty, you're last here, and I'll elaborate the question for you a bit more based on what we've heard so far. You've been in the industry for quite a bit as well. Can we expect for the industry to reach those high standards, especially when it comes to English? Can we incorporate in each company developing such tools, representatives of each culture they work on, so they can, moderate the content? Can we do that? Is it visible at all?
Right. Well, I think that would be quite impossible because, these people need to have the right education, the right skill set, and the right motivation to do it. And the thing is with high resource languages, so the thing is that I guess some languages are low resource because they have a lower number of speakers. And so if the population decreases even further, it gets harder and harder to find such individuals and to inseminate them across all of the industry. I don't think that's likely to happen. But a good thing is that AI can actually be used to kind of preserve these languages, and we're actually so the thing is, English comes first. That's natural because innovation will always follow the path of least resistance, the utility, and also the funding. And with English we just have a lot more training data, and it's most useful to the largest number of people. But the thing is that in parallel, in the machine learning world, there have been methods developed that can do this thing called transfer learning and zero-shot learning. And these techniques, they allow us to kind of translate the knowledge that the model has learned from the English data to other languages. And actually, quality for languages that are low resource has been increasing and increases, and it's the best in history. So I think that we're seeing progress.
Thank you, Mark. You can elaborate it after the last example I have for you. You still see the PowerPoint, right? The shared screen.
We see the translator.
Yeah, so I told you I played quite a bit with ChatGPT. So what I did here, so some things are censored. What I censored are names of actual people for privacy issues, of course, and also derogative words. So I asked ChatGPT, tell me who are the most famous, and I used the derogative word in Bulgarian for homosexual, which has a double meaning. So it's double meaning. So main meaning, I would say, is what you use to push your bike, what you step on when you're moving your bicycle. So it didn't recognize the derogative word. It just thought that it's about people who are, in cycling. So it listed me famous cyclists, I guess, or people involved in motor cycling. So here, clearly, the heavily moderated, I think, ChatGPT didn't catch on the offensive word. However, when I did the same in English, again, using a word with a double meaning, the other meaning of this word is cigarette butt, but also is derogative for homosexual. It immediately catched the derogative word, gave me the warning, and then once again, I censored just the name of, people who I assume are alive. Number one is the national hero who in the public domain, there is no discussion about his sexuality at all. So I'm just kind of confused how it got to him. Just that's a question by itself. Number four, it's censored, but if I say the name, you'll know that it's a famous or not that famous nowadays, journalist and then politician who was more of on the far right and definitely never has advocated for any LGBTQ rights. And then we have the warning in the end. So here I split the questions. We have one question for our human rights activists. I'm going to start with Ms. Boncheva. Do you see an issue with the protection of the right to privacy in the example I showed in ChatGPT? Because ChatGPT generates information for real people, actually, and actually assigns things about them which might not be correct. So this is just an example. And what are the other rights that you see are immediately threatened by such softwares?
На първо място, сексуалната ориентация определено е чувствителен признак и все още има доста хора, които се страхуват от последиците, за да убиват открито, че са геи. Така че дефинирането и публичното оповестяване на нечия сексуалност от изкуствен интелект без неговото съгласие е проблем с правото на личен живот. Той и от естествен интелект също, ако е направено, е проблем от изкуствен по същия начин. В случая това, което лесно се идентифицира от примера, са няколко проблема в работата на изкуствения интелект. Първият проблем е езика на базата данни, от които той черпи. За да стигне до систематизирания списък с имена, чат-ботът най-вероятно ползва бази данни на български език, които след това превежда на английски език. Пак имаме проблем с прозрачността, за да предположим дали това, което си мислим, е правилно, но допускам, че е правилно, че той е работил само с български бази данни, защото едва ли има интерес от публиката, която говори общува на чужди езици, да се интересува от сексуалната принадлежност на Васил Левски, например. И оттам най-вероятно става въпрос за база данни на български. Аз специално, търсейки информация по темата, се оказа, че намерих доста спорна информация по темата. Тоест, ние на първо място имаме проблем с базата данни, защото ние вече виждаме от предходния пример, който показахте, че той не разпознава детайлите, нюансите на езика, защото очевидно не работи особено добре с български. Той се справя по-добре с работата на английски. Тално в случая, за да отговори на този въпрос, той се опитва да черпи база данни на български език, защото единствено на български има подобни спекулации по темата. Втория проблем е самото съдържание на базата данни, защото изглежда той не отсява проверени от непроверени данни и постове изобщо не изключва при вземането на решенията си недостоверно интернет съдържание, защото такова се оказва, че има. И третия проблем е липсата на датчик за чувствителността на информацията и по-специално, освен това, четене на морал в началото на отговора му, което засяга единствено изразните средства при задаването на въпроса, явно няма филтър, който да му забрани да предостави информация, която е чувствителна, дори и хипотетично да е вярна.
За да може и другите също да дадат някакви финални изречения, защото времето напред. Домен, to you. How do you see this privacy issue here? Because it's going to generate all kinds of information. It's not only about sexual orientation, of course, about real people. Domen?
Yes, I would say that, taking a more broader view of these tools and asking yourself, this is what I was thinking when you were demonstrating these topics, right? So you are using specific examples from your language to show how the AI is not being 100% bulletproof solution in that regard. That means that you know more basically than the machine. Imagine a situation where a user would use AI tools or would use big data language collections to start learning something new, right? So, for example, imagine me using Chat AI or ChatGPT or other translation services to start speaking Bulgarian. And, you'd be probably very surprised in the end where I would, throw out some Google Translate Bulgarian language, which wouldn't be a perfect fit with the actual language. And I think in there lies the danger where these tools are often advertised as, this just works, AI is wonderful. And people don't see the issue of using them indiscriminately, right? So we're all, I'm guessing, the panelists or the attendees of this panel are all critical technical users, right? And we don't have this notion to sort of just copy paste everything we see online, hopefully. But these technologies are being deployed worldwide. People who are using them are not, critical users, and we should demand more responsibility. And furthermore, we should demand sanctions for companies that, sort of neglect their own responsibility. Otherwise, we'll just keep going in circles in terms of, oh, look, the next wonderful thing is not doing everything we were hoping to do, and let's just, try and fix it, or let's develop some critical skill set with the user to sort of stave off all the dangers or all the issues that we have with these technologies.
Okay, so a question to our tech experts then here. I fully realize that this one example doesn't mean actually a lot. I believe, something which is set on big data needs to be tested with big data. So including recently a report by the EU, they recommended that, by one of the EU agencies, they recommended that the EU needs to provide access to its computing power to test AI services. So what do you think? What we need to do to properly test you, and how do you see, in prospect in the future, to collaborate with human rights, to collaborate with tech people so they can devise testing data and testing, tools better?
So I was just trying to unmute myself. I think it's important to all parties to be involved, right? This is part of the governance model that I mentioned early on as well, because Domen mentioned that we need to impose all those companies to be more critical, to ensure that they use the right data. This is all there, but we need to make it also sensible. So that's why all the key stakeholders need to be on the table in order to define the criteria under which we can talk about responsible and ethical AI. 100%. That they cannot move beyond. Companies need to start complying with those principles as well, but they need to be mandated at some point, and that happens with everything that we experience nowadays, right? In our life, like certain things are being mandated, and I think all about inclusion and diversity is now being mandated even by EU, right? They said, like, for example, by whatever year, you need to have 50% of your female. 50% of your board needs to be occupied by females. So somehow governmental organizations, they're trying to impose certain criteria. However, the question that we need to ask also whether those are the right criteria as well. So the more key stakeholders are involved, the more information we can get in order to identify which are the main criteria for this, right?
I'm sorry, but we're running out of time. So just give the floor to Mark if we have the 1 minute for his closing, statement. Martin?
Thank you. Right, so I'm actually going to point the audience to the extreme benchmark. It's a benchmark for a collection of languages, both popular and not so popular. And it can be used to assess, NLP technologies for a number of languages, and it's quite well thought out. also, their recommendations are that models should be usable for inference on a single GPU, which is something that, you know, it's quite cheap to get it. And it's available by cloud providers. So yeah, models should be transferable. So yeah, just check out the Extreme benchmark. It's a good resource on that.
Okay, so like one sentence from all of you guys, just to close the session. What is the first thing we need to do about AI, in your opinion? Let's start with Marty. He's unmuted already.
Right. So AI is just another tool in our toolbox, and we should use it responsibly, and we should put the safeguards around it.
Peter.
I think we need to embrace the AI, considering all the things that we have discussed, and make sure we use it absolutely ethically and responsibly. But we need to embrace it. It's here to help, not to replace us.
Okay, Domen.
I would say, you know, ask yourself 3 times if, you know, AI is really the thing you need, and then find some other thing you need.
Great, okay. Katina and Mikhail.
Тъй като нееднократно ставаше въпрос за налагане на етични стандарти, правната регулация е инструментариума за налагането на тези стандарти. Има някои неподозирани предимства в тази правна регулация, защото някои по-консервативни общества, каквото е нашето на Балканите, каквото е цялата посткомунистическа източна Европа, няма особена чувствителност към темата за дискриминация, и тук дискриминацията и предразсъдъците често пъти са несъзнавани и неразпознавани, както от техните жертви, така и от субектите, тези, които дискриминират. И затова една надеждна, но балансирана правна регулация, която да не спъва развитието, обучението и самообучението на изкуствения интелект, би могла индиректно да повлияе на нашата по-консервативна култура именно в такава посока на разпознаване на дискриминацията като първа стъпка за защита срещу дискриминация и преодоляване на тези културни стереотипи и предразсъдъци, особено при по-младите поколения, което може да се случи.
Благодаря. Thank you all for joining. This was just like a little start. This conversation would happen more and more often, I'm sure, in bigger and bigger settings with more and more human rights activists and more people from the tech sector. Because I truly believe we have to find a solution together. One group or another is just not enough by itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.